All right, we are back, and this is Tallarino, who's not here today, and Tuzzolino. So now we're going to move to the NCAA football, and we have a playoff system that is not perfect. And prior to that, we had a system where there was something called the BCS or Bowl Championship Series. Now it's the CFP for college football playoffs. It's kind of the same thing, but it uses different metrics for determining teams. That would be basically your playoff system now, which is nice. So you actually have 4 teams that go into this semifinals and finals playoff setup. But what they really need to do is they need to expand it to 8, and I'm not really sure how they would do that because some teams end up getting slighted, and we've seen it this year. And our final 4 teams are Alabama, we have Clemson, Ohio State, and Washington, which are 4 worthy teams. Make no mistake, they're worthy. But there are other teams that should be in the fold as well. And everybody says that I'm nuts on this radio show or that radio show. I hear the same crap from everybody. But I'll tell you what, the Western Michigan Broncos deserve a chance to be in a playoff because they were the only undefeated team besides the Alabama Crimson Tide in the entire country. And they are in the FBS classification. So they have the same right. Despite strength of schedule and everything else, they have the same right. They should have the same right to be in some sort of a playoff game instead of having to go down to the Cotton Bowl, which is a good game. It's a very good game. But I believe that they should be in a playoff setup, and it's really not fair to P.J. Fleck and the Western Michigan Broncos. And frankly, it's not fair to America because you got the little guy in college basketball that gets a chance to play in the NCAA tournament. I know the dynamic's different, etc., but there should be something to help these other teams at least get the recognition. Hell, it took Boise State 5, 6, 7, 8 years of consistent top performance to get themselves into big bowl games and get into that national championship discussion. And if you may remember, I think they played Oklahoma in one of these games as an undefeated team, and they finished undefeated, and they still weren't the national champions, which is completely wrong. So, moving on, I would happen to say that our 4 teams, these are very good games. You have a Peach Bowl on December 31st between Washington and Alabama. Washington is getting 16 points from Alabama. Now, mind you, Washington has a great defense. Not too many people around the country hear about Washington because they play in the Pac-12. People say it's a weaker conference. I don't really believe that. Alabama plays 3 cupcakes a year, maybe 4. Yes, they're really good. We know that. Nick Saban's got that team rolling. And are they deserving of a number 1 ranking? Yes, they are. But do they beat Washington by 16? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I even would venture to say that Washington could win this game. Yes, I'm not nuts, but I'm saying Washington could win this game. And I would certainly like to see them match up against Clemson on the other side of the ball because Clemson in the Fiesta Bowl will play Ohio State. Now, Ohio State is a very, very good club, but remember, this is the same Ohio State team that lost to Penn State. They didn't even win their own conference, and yet they're in the Final Four, which is ridiculous. So I mean, if you go on that argument, head-to-head, Penn State beats Ohio State. Penn State is left out of the playoff picture, and Ohio State is in the playoff picture, which it makes absolutely no sense, none whatsoever. But I do believe that Ohio State, with a bunch of freshmen on that team, are not going to be up to the task against Clemson, who has a lot of veteran players, 2nd, 3rd, 4th-year players on that team. I think that Clemson is a better equipped team to beat Ohio State, and they're getting 3 points, which is absolute lunacy. I can't even see how that happens. But Clemson is a better team, and Clemson will probably play Washington, I'm hoping, or they're going to play, whether it's Washington or Alabama. I think Clemson's going to play Washington. Clemson wins the national championship this year. That's how I see it on January 9th, but we shall see. That's down at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay. So there are other bowl games that we should pay attention to as well. As we mentioned, we certainly have the Cotton Bowl, Western Michigan, who's getting 8 points against Wisconsin. Now, that's going to be a great game. That's a really tough matchup for Western Michigan because this is a Wisconsin team that really knows how to stop the run. They know how to stop the pass. And they're probably the hottest team outside of what happened in the Big Ten Championship. They're the hottest team in college football, maybe with USC as well, that probably should have been given some real consideration. If they would have won that game last week against Penn State, I think Wisconsin would have been there in that Final Four, in my opinion. But then again, Western Michigan's +8. I think they're gonna win with the 8 points. I don't think they're gonna win the game because they got a very tough Wisconsin team to play against. The Holiday Bowl features the Holiday Bowl is always the most exciting bowl game out of all of them. This year, it is Minnesota from the Big Ten against Washington State from the Pac-12. That's usually the highest scoring bowl game out of all the bowl games. But I always think that these games are very close. The bowl games are typically close. You don't see a lot of blowouts. But the Holiday Bowl is usually that 38-35 type of game, and I'm going to take Minnesota with the 7 points only because of the history of the Holiday Bowl. It's a very exciting game, folks. If you haven't ever seen it, on December 27th, I would highly recommend it. It's probably year in and year out the best bowl game. The Cactus Bowl features Boise State and Baylor, and this is a Boise State team that's been fighting for some kind of credibility. I'm going to give the nod to Baylor in that game. Boise State's having a rough season as far as against the spread. In the Sun Bowl, we have North Carolina, a very good club that's beaten some really quality opponents against a Stanford team that really doesn't have anything but one weapon, and that would be McCaffrey, who's, in my opinion, the greatest player in the country. I'm going to give the nod to Carolina. In the Orange Bowl, Michigan, Florida State, defensive game. Michigan's -7. Go with Michigan over Florida State. And also in the Citrus Bowl, I would like to see Louisville's Lamar Jackson have a big game. He's not going to win the Heisman. That's going to go to Jabril Peppers from Michigan. But look for Louisville to win that game. And finally, in the Rose Bowl, you'll probably see USC put a real good whooping on Penn State, even though they're a 7-point favorite. Real quick about Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball, we just had the winter meetings over in Maryland, and some really big things happened in Major League Baseball. The White Sox were the big winners in the winter meetings. They traded away 2 key players and got back some of the best prospects in the game from the Boston Red Sox. They traded Chris Sale away, and Boston gives back Yoan Moncada and Michael Kopech. Kopech is a 105-mile-an-hour thrower, and Moncada is one of the best. He's actually the number 1 prospect in all of Major League Baseball and a sound third baseman. So look for the White Sox to move Todd Frazier maybe to the DH role or possibly onto another club. They have other stars as well that they can move. Those were 2 very friendly contracts. They got rid of Chris Sale, and they also got rid of Adam Eaton, sent Adam Eaton over to the Washington Nationals for their number 1 prospect and 3 starting pitchers. So they depleted Washington's farm system, and the White Sox really did well in this winter meetings, and that's better than any other team by a long shot. Now, Chapman from the Cubs goes back to the Yankees, picks up a 5-year contract because of what he did with the Cubs for $86 million, which is complete lunacy. How anybody can get that, get out of here. Dexter Fowler goes from the Cubs to the Cardinals. This is interesting because Dexter Fowler has hit .405 against the Cardinals. .405. And he also hit over .320 against the Central Division, who he's going to play over and over and over. So the Cardinals said addition by subtraction. Let's take this guy so he can't beat us up game in and game out. For over 60 at-bats, this guy hit .405 against the Cardinals. I think that was a great move by the Cardinals. All the trade discussion for McCutchen for the Pirates had fizzled, and they fizzled basically because the Chris Sale contract was on the table from the White Sox, and certainly Sale's worth more than McCutchen, even though McCutchen's a great guy. And I will say that we do have an MMA expert in the house here, and I'm not sure how much time we have to get to him right now, but I don't know anything about MMA, but I love the physicality, the hitting, the blood, the splatter. I like what goes on in the ring. It's not a lesser contact sport like boxing, right, Scott?
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, Scott's going to grab a mic for the last 20 seconds here. Give us a quick 20-second on your thoughts for the MMA.
I just really enjoy MMA. It has so many elements to it, so many things you have to practice, and boxing is one form of martial art. MMA is so many different forms that you have to become good at. It's really enjoyable when you get down to learn all the small things about it.
Well, listen, we'll talk more about that on one of our upcoming shows, but thanks, and we'll see you next week.